Um, so yeah, with having not made a single gesture whatsoever of extending your arms or reaching as if to say help me, um, in a shop, like in when you meet Gary Cairns, and he turns to you and says, "Don't reach out to us." Essentially, it disturbed me, but a lot, um, because he wasn't qualifying what he meant by that, and learning that he was a Freemason had obviously uh, there are epistemological structural similarities shared between religions and religions that involve deities. Uh, there's ideas like independent thought capacities being replaced by negotiation processes with people who don't exist and aren't acknowledged, or with minimal psychological self-psychologizing. The deities are representations of their own wants. Um, that doesn't necessarily have to be true either, but it could be. I mean, and it could, in which case it would allow for scapegoating behavior to a supernatural being. But to change someone's life to the point that you want them on the mental health system for the rest of their lives, you've got to be absolutely adamant as to what constitutes them reaching you or trying to contact you to say initiate this process, and what they don't what they don't measure, what they're not. Yeah, it's why I've brought it up so many times in so many videos. Why are they involved in the practice they're involved in, and yet have not measured their critical methods when lives are at stake against the absurd cult claims of Freemasonry, supernaturalist claims, and now with no answer given, it's found from various people affiliated with Freemasons where they get into talk of population culling. If the Book of Job, think of the Book of Job from a Christian's point of view, and think they're taught the moral lesson that, who are you to question God, and they're taught it through the analogy of Job being a really great worshipper of God and having a family of 10 children and livestock, and then Lucifer approaching God saying, well, Job only worships you because his life's good. If you destroyed his life, he would curse your name. So God goes and kills all 10 of his children. Lucifer doesn't even say to him, I want you to kill all 10 of Job's children. God comes up with that one on his own. And God being all-knowing, all-powerful, and then some will be so daring as to say omnibenevolent or all-loving, he wouldn't have needed to go through this experimental process in contest of Lucifer, or to test if Lucifer was right or not, because he would know beforehand, and he would so for the Freemasons, it's with Lucifer being a patron saint, it's Lucifer who makes God his bitch. Even if God was the creator and has the powers, what he doesn't have is character, and that's something Christians, I think, should be challenged to think about. And you'll notice that there's not a whole lot of mention or talk of God in the Gospel of Mark either, the first written one. Jesus' concept of the Son of Man is talked about, I think, more than mentions of God. No, you've got no rising from the dead. You've got no you've got no confession. You've got that he comprehended a question as a statement or a declaration on behalf, when it was really in a coercive attempt. So yeah, it was absolutely considered to be a disastrous threat to the safety of mankind if tech or any of the fruits of mechanical machinery fruits of the works of Niels Bohr, Schrödinger, is it Heisenberg? A lot, and quantum and particle physicists. And they foresaw, if tech were placed in the wrong hands, Einstein had a similar concern about the atomic bomb after splitting atoms. And yeah. So what I do know is that, being actively engaged in trying to reach for a deity can constitute you if it correlated to a point in time where you were surveyed by the men I knew. You would be considered to have been reaching for them for an intervention from them pertaining to your mental health, which they are to tell you, but legally they're to tell you beforehand, or they've violated the Constitution of the Commonwealth. But they don't do that. They seldom talk about the Constitution or the Commonwealth at all, except that they know better, because they're the appointed and anointed to decide who should be culled, population culling, one region where, so they try and be ethical about it and say, well, we need the strong that survive are the people who work, but your line of work could be one that they find or consider to be pathetic, or they're not there. So bias is the clause to that statement. It's no question of how hard you might have worked at something, or how much it means to you, or how you studied for this sort of work, and how it was always a passion to you anyway while you were working for them, and they knew that. With their Freemasonry, they'll reread it. Misread it. They'll misread it to the tune of, here is how we could explain it so that you would be constituted as sick. And you can potentially do that to anyone over anything. Just walk past the citizen and say, oh, hi. Oh, what do you mean? You calling me high? I don't use drugs, you fucking junkie. Come to me, call me high. I'm calling mental health. You clearly need your medicine. You're late. You didn't get your medicine. You think you can come to me and talk about fucking high this, high that? What the fuck is wrong with you? Blimey, if it weren't for capital chemists, you'd be in a rut. Yeah, you'd be in a right problem. You would. They'll straighten you out. And that's called framing the issue, which is to annotate as to how something constitutes a problem in terms of someone's thoughts and values. But yeah, the way that they get to this in terms of their hearing of sound waves from a person, again, Boyle has some correlation. So if I think they chant in Mason churches, so if their chanting is dark and sort of like deep voiced, and then if they're studying sound and speech that falls in a similar range tonally, in terms of tone, they'd be more inclined to think that the content's morally prescriptive because their religious songs are.